Welcome, everyone, to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and last time I wrapped up the Gouverneur K. Warren biography, and the Patreon members voted for me to cover John Bell Hood next. If you'd like to vote for the next general to be covered, join the Patreon page for as little as $1, and you can vote in the next poll. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, and purchase something from one of my online stores. Every little bit helps. Thank you. In December 1864, a young auburn-haired general watched as his defeated army marched across the muddy Tennessee road south. His long, sorrowful face showed his disappointment in the failed campaign to sever William T. Sherman's communication and supply lines from Nashville, Tennessee, and take back parts of the volunteer state for the Confederacy. The general's name was John Bell Hood, widely seen as one of Jefferson Davis's biggest mistakes, placing him in command of the Army of Tennessee. Hood replaced Joseph E. Johnston, a man genuinely loved by the troops but hated by the president. Had Hood's military advancement ended at the division level, it can be confidently said that he would most likely have went down as an effective and aggressive commander. However, his aggressive tactics, a trait Davis prized over Johnston's caution, depleted the ranks of the Army of Tennessee, reducing its manpower. His failed Tennessee campaign bookmarked Hood for criticism that hasn't faded since the war ended. John Bell Hood came from pioneer stock. His family first settled in Virginia, with multiple family members taking part in the American Revolution, fighting against the British. His grandfather, Luke Hood, became characterized by the hard fighting, first battling the British in the United States War for Independence, then pushing westward with hundreds of thousands of others searching for new and cheap land on the frontier. Luke was made for the frontier. His restless spirit and combative temper brought him great acclaim fighting Native Americans in Kentucky and Ohio. Allegedly, he was scalped and left for dead at one point, only to recover. His numerous battles at Fallen Timbers and other battlefields across the frontier probably led to his spells he was reported to have had, where he would line up the local children in battle formations and march and countermarch, yelling orders at the top of his voice. Luke had 3 sons, none with his same spirit of adventure. His son John W. Hood would become John Bell Hood's father. Hood's mother was Theodosia French, the granddaughter of famed frontiersman and acquaintance of Daniel Boone, Richard Callaway. Callaway was a Virginian who fought under George Washington in the French and Indian War and rose through the ranks to become a colonel of the Virginia militia operating in Kentucky. From these family lines, John Bell Hood was born on June 29, 1831. The elder John Hood wasn't a frontiersman like his father Luke. John W. Hood became a doctor and spent a great deal of time in Philadelphia, first attending medical school, and then every year after, although he never graduated, practiced medicine and lectured and taught about his ideas of curing maladies. He believed that people's illnesses came from their own organs moving to inappropriate places, and he designed and advocated for contraptions that were said to keep the organs in their proper places. When the journey across the mountains became too much, Hood opened up a medical practice in Kentucky, where he taught his theories of organ displacement. It was into this world that John Bell Hood grew up. Kentucky wasn't a frontier, but elements still existed from its frontier past. Hood was by all accounts a rambunctious boy, and because of his family's wealth, didn't have many responsibilities. The over 600 acres his father owned was worked by their slaves, so Hood never knew poverty. All this free time let Hood gamble, drink, and court the local ladies. His reputation as a scamp was warranted. He reportedly boasted to one of his aunts, "Other boys don't lead me into trouble. I lead them." To his courting of the ladies, one of his biographers wrote, "It appears that charming women were as necessary to him as food and drink, and obviously women found him fascinating. They admired him because he was a splendid physical specimen, 6 feet 2 inches tall, broad shoulders, narrow hips, blondish auburn hair with a provocative off-color cowlick. They liked his shy, deferential manner, his long, lean face, and his great sad eyes, which made him resemble nothing so much as a dejected and melancholy young bloodhound. But perhaps most of all, women were drawn to him because they sensed his admiration for women and his love of their companionship." After attending a subscription school at age 17, Hood felt he was ready for the next step. He wanted to enter the military, even though his father wanted him to pursue a career in medicine. His father even tried to induce him to be a doctor by offering to send him to Europe, but young Hood's mind was made up. He wanted to be a military officer. The young Hood claimed that entrance into the United States Military Academy at West Point would be easy because his uncle was a congressman. The son won the contest and was admitted to West Point in 1849. Members of his class include future Civil War generals John M. Schofield, Philip Sheridan, Joshua Seal, and William Terrell. Other classmen ahead and behind him included Jeb Stuart, Oliver Otis Howard, James Deschler, Stephen D. Lee, William Dorsey Pender, George Crook, and Alexander McCook, to name a few. One of his instructors was the future Rock of Chickamauga, George Thomas. Hood found that his previous education hadn't prepared him for the rigors of West Point. In his first year, he only accrued 18 demerits. It appeared that Hood took the advice of his father to heart when he left home. If you can't behave, don't come home. Go to the nearest gate post and butt your brains out. That first year was simply an anomaly, as he accrued more and more demerits each year that surpassed the previous one. For his first 4 years at West Point, he only checked out 2 books, Jane Porter's Scottish Chiefs and Walter Scott's Rob Roy. Partway through his time at West Point, Robert E. Lee became the Academy's superintendent. He introduced stricter rules. Hood was a cadet lieutenant, but under Lee's new administration, when Hood was found absent from his quarters, he was placed under arrest and put down to the ranks. For this infraction and others, like entering the commandant's office with a cigar in his hat, he received 196 demerits in his last year, 4 away from expulsion. Hood thought about leaving the academy and starting a farm in Kentucky, but Schofield allegedly talked him out of it. Hood graduated in 1853, standing 44th in a class of 52. He was immediately sent to San Francisco for duty there, a place he found incredibly expensive. He hailed a coach, but found the fare was $20 in gold, so he walked to his duty station. He was positioned at other locations in California, coming into contact with a captain named Ulysses S. Grant and a banker in California named William T. Sherman. One of his West Point classmates, George Crook, was also in California. Crook and Hood grew a wheat crop at their duty station to earn extra income, which, by the time he left the state over a year later, netted him a profit of $1,000 in gold. In 1855, Hood was transferred to the new 2nd United States Cavalry, becoming a second lieutenant in the organization. Some of the officers superior to him in the regiment were Albert Sidney Johnston, Robert E. Lee, William Hardy, and George Thomas. His duty station would be the Texas frontier, traveling with his unit from Jefferson Barracks in Missouri across the plains. Along the way, a norther blew through, throwing the temperature below zero, but the determined young lieutenant pressed on. Hood viewed frontier duty as far better than the lackluster and monotonous jobs he was doing in California. Here, there was more likely to be Indian attacks, and that's where he wanted to go, like his grandfather Luke before him. Hood was officially assigned to Company H, but would perform jobs in other companies during his tenure in the old Army. He wasn't in Texas a year before he traveled back to Kentucky, because his father had suffered a stroke and he needed to take care of some family finances. The elder Hood didn't want his son James to have any claim to the family's wealth because he would squander it, allegedly searching in vain for silver mines and preaching on the side. Hood sorted out his family affairs, being the most trusted child of John and Theodosia, then headed back to Texas. In July 1857, Hood led a group of 25 men from Company G on an expedition to raid some hostile Native Americans allegedly in the area. The arid environment played havoc on the men and horses, but before turning back, Hood spotted a group of Native Americans waving a white flag. He was told before leaving that a group of them would be coming to settle on a reservation, and they would have a white flag to signal it was them, but Hood thought this could be a trick. With 17 of the men, he rode toward the flag, when flames erupted from concealed rifles. Hood's command fought desperately, Hood himself unloading his double-barrel shotgun, and then pulled his revolver to continue the fight. An arrow flew through the air and entered his left hand and pinned it to his saddle. Hood broke off the arrow and pulled his hand away. After emptying his revolver, he ordered his men to fall back and reload. As the weary troops reloaded their weapons, they could hear the Comanches mourning their dead. This meant they too were falling back and done fighting. Hood decided to cut his losses, which included 2 dead and 5 wounded, counting himself. He remained in Texas until September 1860, when he returned home to Kentucky to take care of some family matters following the death of his father. Making the trip back to Texas, he found orders awaiting him that he was to report to West Point as the chief of cavalry. Hood immediately went to Washington, D.C. and told the Adjutant General Samuel Cooper that he didn't want the position. When asked why, Hood responded he believed war was close at hand and he wanted to be in a situation to act with freedom. This is a suspect answer because whether he was on the Texas frontier or at West Point, he would have been able to resign either way. The reluctance to take a staff job probably came from the knowledge that promotion was slow in staff positions. His best chance to rise through the ranks was to be a combatant on the front lines. Hood made the return trip to Texas basically to say bye to his friends, as it was early 1861 and numerous states had already left the Union following the election of Abraham Lincoln as president. Hood traveled to his home state of Kentucky, reaching Louisville, where he resigned his commission in the United States Army on April 16th. He inquired from officials as to when Kentucky may leave the Union. With no satisfactory answer, he journeyed to the capital of the Confederacy, Montgomery, Alabama, where he offered his services not as a Kentuckian, but as a Texan, his adopted state. He was immediately sent to Richmond, Virginia, and reported to Robert E. Lee.